Hello, everyone. Welcome to Eye Care Trends that Equal Marketing Opportunity. Just so you know, a few housekeeping rules. There is a chat feature. We're going to go for probably about 45 minutes. Please feel free to put any questions in the chat or the Q&A, which we'll look at the end. I'm going to use some stats, and just so you know, all the sources are listed. If for any reason you'd like a copy of the slides, I'm going to give you my email at the end, and you could just email me for them. So let's get going. I'm Trudi Charest. I'm the co-founder of Marketing for ECPs. We're a digital marketing agency in the eye care space. We do everything from websites to social media to email marketing, you name it, anything digital for optometrists, opticians, and ophthalmologists, we do it. I'm excited to talk today about eye care trends. I did all the research for this presentation. I will tell you, it is not easy to find trends and statistics in the eye care industry, but I found some pretty interesting ones I'm excited to share with you guys today. I literally grew up in the business. My dad, that's my dad in the white coat with a cigarette in his hand. He started an optical in northern Saskatchewan and, of course, talked his daughter into going into the industry. And it's interesting to see trends and statistics that really show what some of the opportunities are. I think I'm going to surprise you with a few of them. So let's kind of dive in. I do want to say, watch the slides for things like my blue arrows and my yellow highlights, because some of the slides are busy with a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of statistics, and I might be just highlighting one or two and I'll point them out for you. I'm also sharing both US statistics and Canadian statistics. So just so you know, we're going to have both, parties on online, from North America. So I'm going to be sharing a variety, and we are recording. So if at any time you want to review back, or if you're a little behind, you can always watch the recording later. It'll be available on our website at marketingforecps.com. All right, so let's dive in a little bit. It's interesting when I start to talk about the players in the industry, and I'm going to start by, highlighting what's been happening at some of them. So we're going to start in Canada. I'm really starting with, the largest players to some of the smaller players. We're not going to highlight all of them, some of the major players in both countries. New Look, and it's funny because you've probably seen New Look and FYI Doctors. I have just updated this, and FYI Doctors literally just overtook New Look with 479 multiple locations in their portfolio, with New Look coming in at 468. But these two keep, taking over each other, every time I update this slide. What's interesting, when you start to look at what these groups are doing and what trends you're seeing within them. So New Look, last year did some expansion into the US with the Edward Bennier acquisition. So they had their first opportunity to purchase 12 locations in the US, which is a purveyor of fine eyewear. Same with FYI Doctors. You saw US expansion into California last year, bringing them to a North American entity. What else is interesting when you start to look at the FYI Doctors portfolio is they purchased, and this was, about 2 years ago, the optical chain, Factory Optical, and have kept it as Factory Optical. So that was very different from their, years of acquisition. And then their medical aesthetic acquisition, they've now have 2 aesthetic acquisitions with the Med1 network. What does that mean? It means that they're looking at their future as to what are the opportunities when it comes to the aesthetic division. And we're seeing that really open up as the new technology in IPLs, the dry eye therapies, are now offering some of the benefits of aesthetics. And the scope of practice is opening up at least in Canada, where they can talk to aesthetics as far as their marketing. Then you've got Walmart in at 192, Loblaws 184, and let's keep going. So let's talk about a couple of the other players before we move on to the US. Of course, we see Hakim 161, Luxottica. Some interesting things was they did close a few locations in the LensCrafters Pearl Vision portfolio, but they opened 9 sunglass huts. So, a few exchange in their portfolio. Things to watch for, what are happening. Bailey Nelson, since I updated it, is now over 30 locations in Canada and growing, but their marketing is amazing. So every single time we're doing Google searches and showing opportunity, you always see Bailey Nelson coming up in those Google searches. They're spending a significant amount of money to take some of those first spots on the Google pages when consumers are searching for eye care providers. And then of course, the word on the street is about Specsavers and what they are bringing to Canada. At this point, when I updated, there were just going to be over 10 locations, mostly starting in the BC area. They say they're going to be at 200 locations by 2024. I had the opportunity to do a significant amount of research on Specsavers, and all I can tell you, Canada, is get ready, buckle up. They're coming. They're a pretty big presence, and if you're smart, you're going to start protecting your patient base and start marketing and preparing now to protect yourself. So let's go to US. Again, lots of different ways I got some of this research. I've been on the top 50 from Vision Monday information, but also every one of their websites looking at information. What have some of these big players been doing? You can see Vision Source still leading the pack at 3150 at the top. Luxottica underneath. Interesting is all I could find was that I didn't find much for 2021, but 40 locations closed in 2020. So sitting, still second place in the US. National Vision in third place. What was interesting is their, talk about their Walmart, Costco, My Eye Doctor, all coming in nicely in, the 4th, 5th, and 6th place. Where we see eye care partners, what was interesting is their acquisition. They added 95 practices, 11 ambulatory surgery centers, but added 165 doctors to their portfolio in 2020 and 2021. They're poised for growth. VisionWorks was interesting in they're doing a different strategy of expanding their hours. They're going after more convenience and a 100-day guarantee, really driving that patient convenience and patient experience. Warby Parker, they're in the news, they're out of the news, they're in the news. Well, what I did see was their shift to a different philosophy. They're getting, as you know, more into physical locations and bricks and mortars, but they're into selling services now. They're getting into this holistic vision that they're talking more and more about, and starting to really talk to the doctors within Warby Parker, not just the glasses. Kepler added 100 new locations in 2021, heavy on acquisition, heavy on movement and growth. I, of course, didn't put all the players up in the US because there's so many, but talked about kind of those top 20. As you can just see as we finish off talking to some of the bigger players, Shopko was one of the ones that had some significant growth, opened their 100th location in 2021 and have started acquisitions into that Shopko portfolio. And of course, the big news coming out last month was EssilorLuxottica acquisition of Grand Vision, 114 locations, and we're going to see where that goes. So we're going to do a lot of different statistics and a lot of different information. I just think it's interesting that you're going to see what we always talk about is that, you know, the numbers I'm going to post for Canada, the US is almost all the time about 10 times the size. And I think everything we're going to be looking at really is pretty close to those indications. So as you can see here, about 5,900 optometrists across Canada, about 1.7 optometrists per 10,000 people. As we look at the US in 2020, they were showing about 58,000 optometrists. So pretty close to that, 10 times number. What was interesting, according to the Women of Optometry, about 45% of the practicing OD So market size in Canada, about 2 billion. Market size in the US, almost 20 billion. So again, close to that 10 times size. What was interesting, number of businesses, and this is optometrists in Canada, just over 6,000. We're going to see as we get down to a Vision Council stat, the number of doors that they're saying are in the US. But definitely similar size. When we look at ophthalmologists, different story. It's so close, but what we're seeing is a couple more alarming statistics. They say there's about 3.3 ophthalmologists per 100,000 population in Canada. It almost was exactly the same in the US. What we're definitely seeing is there's a decline and what is projected to be for optometrists as the population ages. We're going to look at that here. Again, they were saying there's about 18,000, well, almost 19,000 ophthalmologists in the US. They say there is going to be the need for about 22,000 ophthalmic surgeons by 2025. And this is going to show, a demand that's going to fall short by at least 6,000 physicians. What does that mean for optometrists? Hopefully, even more open scope of practice, but something needs to happen, either immigration, something in order to make up for this loss that they're projecting. You can see just by 2040, the demand for ophthalmological services is going to increase by 64%. That's pretty scary if we're looking at, even just the wait times now for something like cataract surgery. And so it'll be interesting to see whether, there is any movement in how to increase the amount of ophthalmologists coming into Canada and the US, but right now, those are the stats. Let's get into getting into some more, specific statistics about what's happening in practices. So they say that out of the population in Canada, about 55% wear glasses. In the US, about 164 million American adults wear glasses, according to the Vision Council. This is a fairly recent information from the Vision Council. Thought I'd share a few statistics. This is where it says there's roughly about 43,000 brick and mortar locations selling eyeglasses in the US. Pretty interesting, I think, and I'm going to get into a few more. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but I love the fact that there's over almost 220. About 34 million Americans wearing over-the-counter reading glasses. We're going to get into that as an opportunity. There's so many cool stats coming up, so hang tight. So let's get into this. And again, sources are on every page. If you're trying to find something specific, let me know at the end. I love to talk about specific statistics that have jumped out. I'm not going to go through everyone. I'm really highlighting ones that are showing opportunity. So this is anyone using form of vision correction. Nothing in the top part of the graph highlighting. I always love the ones that need correction but aren't using it. So these are people who need glasses but don't use them. 4.4% in Canada, 5.3% in the US. I think that the next kind of, and watch my arrows and watch my yellow highlights, is the one that is always surprising to me, is how many ophthalmologists are doing primary care eye exams. I say this because I just showed you there's a serious decline in the availability of ophthalmologists. So why are we seeing so much primary care happening out of those practices? That's where I think we can move more to the ophthalmology, the opportunity. Interesting, I always love the differences between Canada and the US when we start getting into these specifics. So this is the repurchase cycle. How many times, how often does somebody come back to purchase glasses? In the US, it's every 2 years, but in Canada, it's 3.6 years. It's actually increased by 0.1%, or it was 3.7. Now it's 3.6, but we have a lot of work to do, Canada, as far as getting people to come back more often. Now, on the flip side, in the US, the average pair of frames sold are $157, where in Canada, there's $212. So we're selling higher in Canada versus US, but not as often. Go figure. The other is where, it is mostly sold. So interesting that, independent optical stores, and that's independent opticians, independent optometrists, ophthalmologists, 42% in Canada, 41% in the US, still the highest. But interesting when we start to look at the retail chain. In Canada, 46% are sold in retail optical. The only stat I wanted to put on here, and this is all about lenses, is just the low statistics on anti-reflective, because I'm an optician. I'm like, who gets anti-reflective or who doesn't get anti-reflective anymore? And so 65% of more than 50% of US eyeglass wearers aren't getting anti-reflective. That just didn't make any sense to me. So lots of opportunity there. This is one of my favorite slides because Plano sunglasses are such an opportunity. So let's take a look at US versus Canada. So the good news is in the US, 89% of Americans wear Plano sunglasses. Huge compared to, what are we at, 70% of Canadians. But here's where it gets interesting. So this is how many wear glasses under $50? Plano sunglasses under $50. So 64% of the US population, 38% of the Canadian population. So as a licensed optician, what is sunglasses under $50? Cheap sunglasses, not good sunglasses. I always go to Foster grants. That's what I start thinking. And so we're going to get into even more. So where's their opportunity? Obviously, moving people to a better quality sunglass. Independent optical stores, you'd think that's where most of them are being sold, but look at the low stats. Only 1% of independent opticals, that's optometrists, independent opticians, independent ophthalmology practices, only 1% of the market of Plano sunglasses. We've got opportunity. But here's the worst part of this whole slide. So this is detailing where all those sunglasses are sold. Well, 45% in both Canada and the US are sold in other. Do you know what other is? Other is gas stations, dollar stores. I mean, this is the bottom of the barrel when it comes to quality of Plano sunglasses. So we've got opportunity to take that back and teach people about wearing good sunglasses. This is reading glasses, over-the-counter reading glasses. And again, where do I see opportunity out of this entire slide is the whole idea behind over-the-counter reading glasses is that we need to teach people that we can make them a better quality pair of reading glasses. Let's stop letting them buy 5 pairs a year because that's what's happening, and let's get them into a good quality pair. The last slide on here, last blue arrow, talks about how much contact lenses are currently sold on the internet And it's probably growing a little bit, but not as big as you think. So US 20, almost 25%, Canada about 22% of contacts. That still means you guys 75% or more still an opportunity when it comes to content. I know this is a super busy slide. There's only one arrow here, only one stat I want you to pay attention to. You know how we talked about the purchase cycle being 3.6 years in Canada? Well, here's a worse stat. 55-year-olds and over are only purchasing once every 4.2 years. So why are they only purchasing once every 4.2 years? Who has worse vision than 55 and older? So again, a huge opportunity. Let's make sure we're educating seniors on why they need to purchase more often and they have more money. Okay, the eyewear market, 14% of total revenue that's going to be generated in sales, in online sales by 2023. So how much is it going to grow? I want to show you this slide because it's not that much. Is that if this projection, and this is eyewear sales, if this projection comes true, and if what we're seeing right now is 13% of sales are not online. So this projection of 14% probably isn't even going to be realized. Is it growing online eyewear sales? Yes, but look at how much is still being bought in physical stores. You can take this business back. All right. Some interesting stats, and this is, more interesting because of pandemic. So this is a few pandemic stats. Is the bad habits when it comes to eye exams. We would love it as an industry if people would purchase every year, but they're not, or they're coming back every year. What we really want to do is look at what's happened recently. So they say 38.5% of people have not had an eye exam in this last year during the pandemic. Almost 1 in 10, 9.8, have not had an eye exam over the last 5 years. This is crazy stats, you guys. When we start asking why they haven't had an eye exam, they say they didn't need one. So again, we're not doing, even what a dentist would do is teaching them the value of having the eye health check. And they're not coming in because their vision is fine. That doesn't mean there's not something else happening that they're not seeing or feeling. COVID-19 caused 1 in 5 or 23% to miss an eye exam. The problem is we're not making that up yet. And so again, opportunity. I just saw this slide, so I threw it in here really quick today. And this came up from the site myvision.org. And again, interesting stats. They say 2 out of 5 say their eyesight has gotten worse since the pandemic. 1 out of 3 have not had their eyes tested since pandemic. 24% avoided an eye test despite have gotten stronger prescriptions since pandemic. Are you guys seeing opportunity here? Because we sure are. Okay, more statistics. And again, watch for the yellow, watch for the blue arrows. Canadians change their glasses, as we talked about, only, on average 3.6 years. But this was interesting when it said only 1 in 4 Canadians have a second pair of glasses. That's quite a bit, because everybody, at least 54. More interesting, only 12% of adult Canadians wear prescription sunglasses. This is a huge opportunity. Even if we just create a little bit of momentum here, we're going to see a lot more movement into prescription eyewear. Myopia, obviously, big talk about myopia. There's a lot of movement in practices to start offering myopia control with all the new technologies available and materials. It's a good thing because it's growing substantially. Approximately 30% of the Canadian population. It's increasing dramatically among children. Some interesting stats here, about 41.6% of Americans are nearsighted, up 25% since 1971. and projected to grow to almost 50% of the world will be myopic by 2050. That's crazy. So again, opportunity for us, but why is this important? Well, it's because it's more than just an opportunity. Myopia worsens children's eyesight, it decreases children's quality of life, and it has the risk of children suffering from severe eye issues such as glaucoma and retinal detachments. So obviously, one of the things that is also happening across North America, just happens to be a Canadian statistic, is the population is growing in both countries. And a lot of it is immigrants. And so what does that offer as an opportunity? Well, ethnic populations like Asians and Indians are more likely to develop cataracts, AMD, glaucoma, and have a 90% prevalence to myopia. Also, Asian populations have specific needs due to their facial anatomy, and they have a lower awareness of their need for regular vision care. So this is all opportunity for us to be thinking about who we're serving. Some other interesting stats when it comes to diversity and ethnic populations. It was really interesting when I saw some of the specific eye care is eye diseases related to ephemenesis. So Asian children have the highest prevalence of myopia. White children have the highest prevalence of hyperopia. Hispanics have the highest prevalence of astigmatism. Did you know that before? Because I didn't. 72% of Canadian adults between 18 to 39 use 3 electronic devices a day. Heavy usage of digital devices, smartphones, laptops, tablets, TV, and 90% of them reported at least one eye-related problem linked to digital devices. So things like tired eyes, headaches. Then there was followed by disrupted sleep, neck and back pain. So are you watching for signs of digital eye strain? Are you talking about specific signs of digital eye strain? So where you're talking dry and itchy eyes, watery eyes, tired eyes, headaches, blurred vision, neck and back pain, disrupted sleep cycles, dark bags under the eyes, like talking specifically to some of these, things that everyone probably is experiencing to some degree. So lots of information, but we're diving into a new category. So let's talk about children. And we're going to talk about children in both US and Canada. Let's talk Canada first. So 6% of adult Canadians and nearly 25% of school-age children know they need vision correction and do not have it. In fact, this was crazy statistics for me. 86% of Canadian children have never had an eye exam prior to school. I'm going to show you some more stats on the next slide, but nearly 40% of US preschool age children nationwide have never had a vision screening. And there are some disparities as who's getting tested as well in different locations. And so where are some of these statistics going? Well, 1 in 4 school-age children has an undetected vision issue. 61% of their parents think they would have noticed a vision issue. But here's what happens. Kids are agile and adaptive. And so they adapt to their surroundings, and their parents don't realize that they actually have a visual defect. And we know that their educational experiences are directly impacted by their vision. So more stats, I love stats. 1 in 7 have a vision-threatening eye condition that is preventable and treatable. They are saying to expect a 30% increase in vision loss every decade and triples by the time you're 75. And it is the most feared disability in Canadians. But wait, I'm going to show you a few more stats along this. Like I'm telling you some of the worst fears, and yet people know it or feel problems and don't go get their eyes checked. It just is amazing. the last thing I want you to know is that 70% of Canadians have extended health care coverage. And I don't have the stat right here, but it was something like 40% don't use their coverage every year on lots of different things, not just eye exams and eyewear, but quite a few different things that they could use them from massage to eye care, and they don't. Same thing with the US. They say 50% of US adults have some type of vision care or managed vision care coverage, and not all of them are using it. When we start talking US stats, I mean, this also says to me is that for those of you that want to go after cash pay patients, 50% are cash pay patients, or 50% are vision care. So you can really go after either market. Seniors vision. So 1 in 4 Canadians develop irreversible vision loss by their 75. But here's where I wanted to go with this, is that these are the statistics that really got to me. They said that people and seniors who experience vision loss also are 4 times more likely to have hip fractures, are admitted to nursing homes 3 years earlier, experience 3 times the incidence of depression, experience twice as many falls, and have double the mortality rate because they start to lose their vision. 59% experience symptoms of potential eye disease, yet only half of them go to an eye care professional. I'm like, how can you be experiencing symptoms of something wrong with your vision in your eyes and you don't go see somebody about it? In fact, as you guys all know, because you're eye care professionals, is some of the times when you start to feel any symptoms, it's actually progressed past the point of helping. And this, again, why you need to go for annual eye exams. It's why we need to teach people they have to go for annual eye exams. Awareness, obviously an issue. I want to go back there. When we were talking about some of the, the knowledge out there, why people don't go. And again, it comes back to education, and it comes back to us awareness. We realize that the awareness of common eye diseases is low. AMD, leading cause of vision loss in Canada, yet 51% of Canadians aren't even familiar with the disease or have even heard about it. Diabetes, leading cause of blindness in Canadians and probably Americans, and yet nobody's heard about diabetic retinopathy, or they're not understanding what it is or what it could be. We have a great opportunity when it comes to just talking about eye disease, awareness of eye disease, letting people know about eye disease. One of the things that we also hear is patients may not know they've developed changes associated with sight-threatening diseases until it's too late. So that would be glaucoma, for example. Prevalence of vision loss, you can see the statistics right now of how it's going to grow over the next few years, a lot of it based on aging population, but definitely an issue when it comes to expanding the services that we're already offering, making sure people are coming in for regular checkups. Only one stat on this slide that I wanted you to see, and that is just how many more cataract surgeries are being performed every year, and the growth that's about to happen in surgery just in general. And the fact that right now in the US, for example, 40 Americans 40 years and older are either legally blind, 4.2 million, or are having issues with low vision. So where is that going to go? It's only going to increase. Again, we talked about glaucoma. 250,000 Canadians are living with glaucoma, yet only half are aware that they have the disease right now. It's treatable to a degree. They can slow the progression. They need to see somebody quick. Diabetic retinopathy, diabetes, as you know, is one of the leading growing diseases out there because people just aren't eating properly, looking after their health. They're expecting it to rise by 14 million by 2026. The risk of blindness is 25 times higher with somebody with diabetes. It's the #1 cause of blindness. We're seeing 20% new cases being diagnosed. And they say 1 out of 4 adults with diabetes age 60 and older have not seen an eye care provider. Again, going back to opportunity. The only stat I wanted to show you here was, one of the ones suffer eye daily, 200 every single day. So 10 times that in the US, and there's 2,000 people suffering eye injuries daily. Interesting stat, this is estimating the eyewear market size in the US to 2028. And you can clearly see, so spectacles are purple, sunglasses are the light blue, contact lenses are the teal green. You can see what's going to lead the market, and it's spectacles in growth. Every sector is going to have a little bit of growth. The entire portfolio is going to have growth, but it's spectacles that are going to lead the growth. What else do they say is going to lead the growth? It's going to be eye exams. And they cite it as the important factor of growing any practice currently is getting patients to come back more frequently for eye exams. It'll grow everything in the practice. The more we can grow the eye exams and fill the schedules, the more, and get people back more frequently, the more we're going to grow the practice overall. As we're wrapping up, we're getting close, you guys. Few more stats is, what is one of the biggest opportunities is millennials and teaching the new and growing population what they need to do to take care of their eyes. A new study that had a few different stats that I thought were really interesting. And again, we go back to some of the things you've heard over and over. 1 in 10 have not had an eye exam in 5 years. 2 in 3 people leave in disposable contact lenses overnight. 25% wash contact lenses incorrectly. 83, almost 84% ignore the 20/20 rule. Almost half, 50%, are not using any blue light filters on smartphones. 73% use air conditioning or fans at night, obviously causing dry eyes. Lots of mega trends out there, from telemedicine, new technology, private equity coming in, mergers and acquisitions, UK, Europe, Australia entering the US and Canadian markets. So we're seeing a lot of new players in the market, changes to scope of practice, a lot of integration of practices. We're seeing ODMD, optician-owned practices starting to merge together, also getting purchased by private equity and merging together. A lot of medical eye care. We think medical eye care is the future of eye care, and that's really getting into the medical niches like dry eye, vision therapy, low vision, sports vision, myopia control, and of course, as we just mentioned, millennials as the new consumer. I know there was a ton, and we're just gonna wrap up with saying, what are kind of the 4 biggest opportunities you have, knowing all those statistics. They need to know about health, about eyewear. Give them the expertise that you have and tell them what they need to do. Get them to come back for annual eye exams, recall them, just like a dentist does, tell them why they have to come back for annual eye exams, and that there's a fear, that you're not going to catch something if they don't. Marketing, there's a ton of opportunity of marketing your business, your practice, telling the story of what you need, and dominating in your local geography. And then sales. And when I say sales, it's like, making sure that you're taking the opportunity to teach people why they need a new pair of glasses, why they need anti-reflective coatings, why blue filters on glasses are so important, what makes a better plano sunglass than a $50, or $20 Foster grant. And so it's taking those sales opportunities. I see a couple questions. I'm going to go down and check the questions, but at the same time, You know, there is a giveaway on marketingforECPs.com. We're giving away a whole folder full of images for social media that are all about facts and stats. And so you can take some of these stats and, you know, educate on your social media. If you want the slides and are interested in some of these stats, you can always email me, Trudi@4ecps.com. This will be recorded and up on our website under our webinars as well. So on that note, let's just take a quick look. So somebody's asking for the presentation. Absolutely, we'll get that for you. Any ideas for getting millennials excited and interested in their eye health? You know, I think, again, it's talking about it. It's no different than, you know, number one, just educating them on how important it is for proper nutrition, proper annual eye exams, taking care of their eyes. How can they take care of their vision? Wearing good quality sunglasses, protecting from ultraviolet. Again, it's teaching. I think, you know, millennials, just like anybody else, want to do the right thing for their body and for their eyes. And so, you know, give them that information for sure. So any other questions, you guys? Love to answer anything if you have. Sounds like maybe it's going a little quiet, so we'll wrap up. Thank you guys so much for being here today. You can always shoot me a question at Trudi@4ecps.com. Happy to answer anything after this presentation, but have a great day, everyone. Thanks for being here.